What if the secret to a thriving garden isn't in a new fertilizer, but in vegetables you've never even heard of? Imagine ancient superfoods, long forgotten, holding the key to unlocking your soil's full potential and revolutionizing your harvest. These aren't relics of the past, they're the future of regenerative gardening, and they've been waiting in seed banks and old gardens for gardeners like you to rediscover them. Walk into any modern grocery store, and you'll find the same 30 or 40 vegetables repeated endlessly. Tomatoes bred for shipping durability rather than flavor, carrots selected for uniform orange color and straight roots, lettuces chosen because they fit perfectly in plastic clamshells. This monotonous parade of produce represents less than 1% of the vegetable diversity our ancestors knew intimately. The shift happened gradually over the 20th century as industrial agriculture prioritized characteristics that had nothing to do with nutrition, flavor, or ecological benefit. Growers needed vegetables that could survive mechanical harvesting, long-distance transport, and extended shelf life. The thousands of regional varieties that fed communities for centuries were systematically abandoned in favor of a handful of commercially viable cultivars. What we lost in this transition goes far beyond nostalgic flavors and unusual colors, though those losses are significant enough. We surrendered vegetables that tasted like concentrated essence of themselves, heirloom tomatoes that made modern varieties taste like water. By comparison, beans, with textures ranging from creamy to meaty, and roots that filled your kitchen with aromas that told stories of the soil they grew in. But the most devastating loss was invisible to most gardeners. We abandoned the very plants that had evolved alongside soil ecosystems to create mutually beneficial relationships. These forgotten vegetables weren't just food, they were ecological partners that built soil structure, fostered microbial diversity, and created conditions for abundance that modern monoculture vegetables simply cannot replicate. When we narrowed our focus to those few dozen commercial crops, we didn't just lose genetic diversity in our seed supply. We lost centuries of accumulated wisdom about how different plants contribute to soil vitality in ways that transcend simple nutrient cycling. Modern gardening has trained us to think about soil fertility in terms of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratios, as if soil were nothing more than an inert growing medium requiring chemical supplementation. The lost vegetables reveal this thinking for the reductive fallacy it is. Consider the forgotten root crops like skirret, a medieval garden staple with clusters of sweet finger-like roots that once graced tables across Europe. Skirret doesn't just extract nutrients from soil, it fundamentally restructures the soil environment through its complex root architecture. Those multiple roots penetrate deeply while branching laterally, creating networks of channels that persist long after harvest, improving drainage in heavy soils while simultaneously increasing water retention through enhanced soil aggregation. As these roots grow and shed root hairs and exudates, they feed specific populations of bacteria and fungi that modern vegetables have lost the ability to attract. The real magic happens in the rhizosphere, that thin zone of soil immediately surrounding plant roots, where the most intense biological activity occurs. Lost vegetables like scorzonera, a black-skinned root vegetable grown throughout Europe until the 20th century, produce root exudates, complex cocktails of sugars, amino acids, and organic acids that are fundamentally different from modern carrots or parsnips. These exudates attract and feed beneficial soil organisms that have co-evolved with these plants over millennia. Some lost varieties foster specific mycorrhizal fungi that extend root networks by hundreds of feet, accessing nutrients and water far beyond the plant's physical reach, while simultaneously binding soil particles into stable aggregates that resist erosion and compaction. Others cultivate bacterial communities that fix atmospheric nitrogen, suppress soil pathogens, or solubilize minerals locked in soil particles. When we lost these vegetables from our gardens, we lost the ecological services they provided, services that no amount of compost or fertilizer can fully replicate, because they depend on living relationships between specific plants and specific microorganisms. Across the world, a quiet revolution is underway as seed savers, ethnobotanists, and passionate gardeners rescue forgotten vegetables from the edge of extinction. Organizations like Seed Savers Exchange and the Svalbard Global Seed Vault have become modern arcs, preserving genetic diversity that would otherwise disappear entirely. But the real heroes are the individuals who don't just store these seeds, they grow them out, season after season, maintaining the living genetic lines and documenting how these plants behave in contemporary gardens. In Appalachia, elderly gardeners are sharing seeds of greasy beans pole varieties with a unique texture and flavor that younger generations have never tasted. In the Southwest, Native American communities are reclaiming ancestral crops like tepary beans and amaranth that thrive in arid conditions where modern vegetables struggle. The transformations these growers witness go far beyond novelty. A market gardener in Vermont began growing Good King Henry, a perennial vegetable common in European gardens before spinach displaced it, primarily out of historical curiosity. Within 2 seasons she noticed that the soil in those beds had become noticeably more friable and alive with earthworms compared to her conventional vegetable beds. The Good King Henry's deep taproots were mining minerals from subsoil layers, while its year-round presence provided continuous root exudates that sustained soil microbes through winter when annual vegetable beds lay dormant. In Oregon, a permaculture designer integrated sea kale, a coastal European vegetable nearly lost to cultivation, into his guild plantings and discovered it attracted beneficial insects that significantly reduced pest pressure on neighboring crops, while its extensive root system stabilized soil on a sloped site prone to erosion. These aren't isolated anecdotes, they're patterns emerging wherever gardeners reintroduce ecological diversity. The accessibility of these seeds has improved dramatically in recent years. Online seed exchanges connect growers globally, allowing anyone to request small quantities of rare varieties. Specialty seed companies like Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, Adaptive Seeds, and Uprising Seeds now offer hundreds of unusual vegetables alongside detailed growing information. Local seed libraries are sprouting in communities everywhere, functioning as living repositories where gardeners can borrow seeds, grow them out, save seeds, and return them for others. The barriers to growing lost vegetables have never been lower. What's required now is simply the curiosity to try something our ancestors knew intimately, but that we've almost completely forgotten. Integrating lost vegetables into your garden doesn't require abandoning the tomatoes and peppers you love. It means expanding your palette to include plants that offer unique contributions to soil health. Start by identifying 1 or 2 forgotten vegetables that intrigue you and suit your growing conditions. If you garden in shade, explore vegetables like Alexander's, a biennial green that thrives in partial shade and was once as common as parsley before celery replaced it. For sunny, well-drained sites, consider growing salsify or its close relative scorzonera, both offering edible roots with oyster-like flavors while their long taproots break up compacted subsoil layers. In areas with short growing seasons, explore fast-maturing greens like reish, a drought-tolerant spinach relative that self-seeds reliably and comes in stunning purple and gold varieties that add both beauty and soil-building capacity to your beds. So, the key here is understanding that these plants often have different cultural requirements than modern vegetables, mainly because they evolved in totally different agricultural contexts. Now, many lost vegetables are either perennials or self-seeding annuals, which means they don't really fit neatly into the intensive annual rotation system that most vegetable gardeners use. But honestly, this is actually an advantage for soil health. Perennials keep living roots in the ground all year round, preventing erosion, feeding soil life continuously, and building organic matter through their persistent root systems. Vegetables like walking stick kale, Turkish rocket, and tree collards can give you harvest for years from just a single planting, all while improving soil structure the whole time. And then you have self-seeding varieties like Minutina and Claytonia, which drop seeds in late spring that germinate in fall. So they're basically managing their own succession without you needing to intervene, and they provide ground cover that protects and enriches the soil between your main season crops. The ripple effects of growing lost vegetables extend far beyond your garden fence. Many of these plants produce flowers that feed pollinators when little else is blooming, filling critical gaps in nectar and pollen availability. Their genetic diversity makes them inherently more resilient to pests and diseases than modern varieties bred from narrow genetic bases. As climate change makes weather patterns increasingly unpredictable, this resilience becomes not just valuable, but essential. These are plants that have survived centuries of growing conditions without chemical intervention, selected by countless generations of gardeners for their ability to produce despite adversity. By growing them now, you're not just improving your own soil. You're participating in preserving genetic resources that may prove critical for food security as conditions continue to change. The lost vegetables waiting to enter your garden represent more than historical curiosities or flavor adventures, though they're certainly both of those things. They're an invitation to see your garden as part of a much larger ecological and historical continuum, connected to the gardeners who came before you and those who will come after. Every seed you plant of a forgotten variety is an act of preservation, a vote for biodiversity, and a practical step toward building soil that becomes more fertile rather than more depleted with each passing season. These vegetables ask you to shift from the extractive mindset that dominates modern agriculture, where soil is mined for nutrients that must be constantly replaced, toward a regenerative approach, where the very act of growing food builds the capacity to grow more food. Start this season by seeking out just one lost vegetable that calls to you. Grow it not as a novelty, but as a genuine crop, saving seeds if possible and paying attention to how it interacts with your soil and the broader ecosystem of your garden. Share your experiences with other gardeners, trade seeds, and contribute your observations to the collective knowledge being rebuilt around these plants. The seed savers who preserved these varieties through decades of obscurity kept them alive, specifically for moments like this, when gardeners would rediscover their value and bring them back into cultivation. Your garden is the perfect place for that rediscovery to happen, and your soil will thank you with increased vitality, resilience, and the kind of fertility that compounds year after year rather than requiring constant external inputs. If this exploration of forgotten vegetables has sparked your curiosity about the hidden potential in plants our culture has overlooked, subscribe to the Living Soil Lab for deep dives into regenerative growing methods that honor both traditional wisdom and ecological science. Share this video with gardeners ready to expand beyond the familiar and discover what our ancestors knew about building truly living soil. Together, we're not just growing food, we're restoring relationships between plants and soil that modern agriculture severed, one forgotten vegetable at a time.